Say thanks for joining me on Upfront. Vice Prime Minister, is it fair to say that more than 4 years into this conflict, your government, the government of Ukraine, has lost the war with Russia in eastern Ukraine?
It's totally the opposite, I think, because I think that Ukraine is winning the war because Ukraine is defending itself, defending its territory. If at the beginning we had to fight with volunteer battalions, at this point we have one of the strongest armies in Europe. It ranks 10th in Europe right now, and we have the capacity to withhold these attacks of the Russian Federation. Moreover, I think we have been also successful in securing the worldwide support to stand united and to deter the aggression of the Russian Federation.
You say you're winning and that you have one of the strongest armies in Europe, yet you still don't control Donbass, a territory roughly the size of Kosovo, with a population of more than 6 million people. Pro-Russian separatists have controlled that region of Ukraine since the summer of 2014, and you're nowhere near to getting rid of them and getting that back, are you?
Well, it's not about pro-Russian separatists, and we have to straighten up our language. It's about regular Russian army, which is on the territory of Ukraine. All of the so-called separatists, they have been aligned and trained and provided with weapons by the Russian Federation, and they have been managed by the Russian Federation as a part of their command.
The point is, you haven't beaten them and you haven't taken back Donbass, and we're into the 5th year of this war. How can you say you're winning?
Because we have taken a very conscious decision to follow on the international law, and we are adhering to the Minsk agreements that our president has signed, and we have promised that we will be taking over the territories back only by political and diplomatic wins, but not with the attacks by our military. We have to be able to name spade a spade and not pretend that there is any type of civil war or whatever going on in Ukraine. It's a foreign aggression, and Ukraine is taking care of itself and holding this attack from the Russian Federation. And yes, unfortunately, we're spending a huge human capital on this war. Unfortunately, we have so many people dead. We have more than 25,000 wounded as well, both civilians and military. And it's not easy. And I think that calls on the international community to work more in united fashion together, and to ensure that they are creating pressure for the Russian Federation.
You say it's all foreign aggression, not a civil war. And clearly foreign aggression is a big part of the story, no doubt about it. But to say there's no civil conflict is just disingenuous. You take Crimea, for example, which the Russians took over, had its controversial referendum in 2014. Now, we can argue about the polling or the referendum results, but the reality is lots and lots of ethnic Russians living in Crimea were perfectly happy to not be part of Ukraine and to be part of Russia. Since then, you've had more ethnic Russians moving into Crimea. You've had Ukrainians leaving Crimea. The Russians have expanded their presence in Crimea. You're never getting Crimea back. Surely that's a reality now that you just have to accept.
No, we don't have to accept this reality. We've seen the example of Baltic states that have been occupied by the Soviet Union for more than 50 years. And for that matter, the US, for example, did not recognize this occupation of the as a legal one of the USSR, of these Baltic republics. And that's exactly will be the case that with Crimea. It will one day come back home.
I'm just saying, would you meet me halfway and say there are plenty of people who are not happy with rule from Kiev? Would you accept that?
It's not about being unhappy with the rule from Kiev. It's about that fact that quite a few of Russian citizens have already moved in Crimea at this particular point, that the terror and the human rights violations in Crimea are just terrific. People are afraid to speak out.
And no one's denying the human rights abuses either by Russian forces or Russian separatists. But the UN, which have monitored the conflict and produced reports on the conflict, have put out detailed reports accusing both sides of human rights abuses. They have accused the government of Ukraine of using artillery and shelling against civilian areas. What's your response to the United Nations?
we have this special monitoring mission of the OSCE on the territory of Ukraine, and now we are talking with you about Donbass. We are not talking about Crimea. Let's be straight about that and clear about that.
Yes.
And we are very appreciative that we have this mission, because this mission particularly can give objective information on what is happening. Ukrainian military do have the right to fight back when they are being shelled by the Russian forces.
But they don't have the right to shell civilian areas, which is what human rights groups and international monitors have said.
It's not about shelling the civilian areas, but unfortunately, sometimes Russian Federation forces are stationing their ammunition in, for example, kindergarten, in, for example, the hospital. So there could be something that is going in the direction of the particular ammunition there.
The Russians say that your country, your government, is a hotbed of fascists and neo-Nazis, which is obviously not true. I know the far right have not done very well in Ukrainian elections. So they aren't doing well electorally. But here's the problem. Outside of elections, they do have a presence in Ukraine. And even in parliament, you have a Speaker of Parliament, Andrei Perubi, who was the co-founder of a neo-Nazi party, Svoboda, formerly known as the Social National Party of Ukraine, which was founded on the basis that, quote, we are the last hope of the white race. Pretty embarrassing to have someone like that as a Speaker of your parliament.
I think you're running this on the false information.
Okay.
First of all, Speaker Perubi has nothing to do with anything of neo-Nazis or ultra-right.
Did he not co-found Svoboda, what was called the Social National Party, which was based on the National Social Party?
No, he has never been part of Svoboda. That's one thing. Another one, he has been part of Народный Рух Украины, which has nothing to do with this. But that's one thing. And another thing is that Ukrainians, as opposed to many of the European countries right now, do not have ultra-rights in the parliament. For example, I would be worried about all this ultra-rights getting to the parliaments in Germany, to the parliaments in Italy, to the parliaments in other countries of Europe. Speaker Perubi is absolutely centrist
It's a well-reported, well-documented fact in Ukraine and beyond, as you know, that he was one of the co-founders of the Social National Party, which is a far-right white nationalist party.
You can judge by his deeds whatever he is doing, and he has nothing to do with ultra-right parties. That's one thing.
Well, people can go and look it up for themselves. It's not just the Speaker of your Parliament, though. It's your government's Interior Minister, your cabinet colleague, Arsen Avakov, who has close ties to the Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi militia that uses symbols borrowed from the Waffen-SS. He even appointed an Azov commander as police chief of the Kiev region, which was condemned by the chief rabbi of Ukraine.
I am okay with the police chief in Kiev, with the police chief in Ukraine, who are providing for a secure organization of Kiev prides, which we've been having every single year for a couple of years in a row, and they are growing in their numbers. I am okay with them providing. Are
you okay with the Azov Battalion, which is one of the strongest militias in Ukraine, which is a neo-Nazi militia?
Doing their professional work at the work of the police.
Vice Prime Minister, are you okay with the Azov Battalion?
That does not have anything to do with any political affiliation. I think that we are making sure that people who have been accused of and who have been actually have been seen as doing something wrong, they would be brought to the justice. And
they're not being brought to justice. They're being given Ukrainian military uniforms. They're being brought. It's called the national militia. Your government has brought in a bunch of militias into the military and security services. You know that. I
think it's quite a few of our international observers were so dissatisfied and so concerned with the fact that Ukrainians first were fighting the war against Russian Federation with the help of volunteer battalions, and then there was a request and there was a clear willingness also from the Ukrainian side to ensure that those volunteer battalions would become parts of the whoever wants to continue serving would become parts of the armed forces or the police, and therefore whoever was serving well and whoever wanted to continue
even if they're from neo-Nazi groups like the Azov Battalion.
I'm not talking about Azov Battalion.
Well, I've asked several times about the Azov Battalion. Why won't you talk about them? Do you consider the Azov Battalion to be a white supremacist neo-Nazi group? Because their members wear swastikas. Their founder talks about the white supremacy and white pride. Do you consider the Azov Battalion to be a neo-Nazi group?
in every single country, you would have different people.
That's not what I asked. I'm not asking about other countries. Do you, the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, consider the Azov Battalion, one of the Ukraine's biggest militias, to be a neo-Nazi group?
Of the state?
Are you going to answer the question?
That has nothing to do with any
That's
policy
not true.
of the
The
state.
Azov Battalion is linked to the state now. So do you consider them to be a neo-Nazi group?
There is no linkage of the Azov Battalion to the state. No.
So it should be even easier for you
whatsoever.
to disown them. Do you consider them to be a neo-Nazi group?
I do not think that they are a neo-Nazi group, but they are not connected to the state, and that's where the red line is.
And when Amnesty International says the Ukrainian state is rapidly losing its monopoly on violence, pointed to all these militias that now control the streets in agreement with your interior ministry, that doesn't worry you? You want to be a liberal democracy, join the EU, and you have these militias basically attacking LGBT protests, attacking gatherings of Roma supporters, with tacit approval of the state.
You know, I'm the one at the government that is speaking out with great concern and necessity to react by law enforcement whenever such cases are happening. And I think it would be wrong to just close the eyes if something of that type is happening. But again, you have to understand that quite a few cases that are being portrayed or being reported initially as some intolerant cases of attacks, then it turns out later on that quite a few of them do have the Russian trace in it.
Hold on, it's very easy to shout Russia when Human Rights Watch talks about brutal attacks on Roma people, LGBT people, rights activists, when Amnesty says the same thing, when Freedom House says the same thing. Is that all a Russian conspiracy?
No, but partially it is. That's one thing.
Okay.
And the other, yes, there are cases where Russia is working, unfortunately, very actively also inside Ukraine. That's one thing. And another thing is that whenever these cases are happening, we are reacting fiercely against them, and the law enforcement is taking care of that.
That's
and
not
is
what
making
human
their
rights groups are saying about your justice system.
And where, you know, I would also want to see more professional approach back home, but I think when you are rebuilding the whole institution, sometimes it takes time to rebuild them, and it takes time for them to react properly. So yes, we do have separate cases, and I'm very concerned, for example, with what has happened with Roma people, and definitely, you know, I'm one of those that is speaking out at the governmental level, at the national level, in order to ensure that this is not happening anymore.
Next year, you're going to have presidential elections in Ukraine in March 2019. Is President Poroshenko going to run again in that election? Do you think he should run again? He's been dogged with all sorts of allegations about corruption, etc.
I think that President Poroshenko has done an incredible job of uniting the nation and leading it against the aggression, and also working very closely with all the international allies. And I think that he should run, because right now we do have, you know, quite a ground for populism in Ukraine, and the other forces that are raising their heads are not as genuine as they are trying to portray themselves, unfortunately.
Vice Prime Minister Sinsad, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for joining me on Up Front.
Thank you.